Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Book 3 of the Stormlight Archive, this massive volume, Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. This is an interesting read for me. I have kind of mixed feelings about it overall, especially when comparing it to the previous two books in this series. But let's go ahead and get into it. So overall, I did end up giving this book a 4-star rating, which is the same rating I gave to The Way of Kings, and I did give Words of Radiance 5 stars. It's one of the best fantasy books I think I have ever read. And I think I would rank this book obviously below Words of Radiance, but also below The Way of Kings. And this is an interesting book in that I think this is a super important book to the story. This one really built out the world in a lot of ways that weren't explored in the first two books. And while I can appreciate how important it is, and those things going forward are going to be huge, I think, for the series, that doesn't necessarily mean I enjoyed all of it. I really think that this book built up to just an explosive and amazing ending. The ending of this book is, I've heard about the Sandor Lanch, I've felt like I've experienced it, but I think this book is definitely the most apparent of the books that Sanderson has written, where at the end it is just a culmination of so much, and on a scale that honestly I wasn't really even expecting at this book. So with that all being said, overall it's still a really good book, but there were some parts of it that definitely held it back for me, unfortunately, and it definitely did not reach the same heights as Words of Radiance for sure. I don't think it's that much worse than The Way of Kings, and overall I think this will be a book that, as the series goes more and more forward, that it'll be kind of the cornerstone of the series. With all that being said, let's go ahead and talk about what I did like, what I didn't like, and then some of my hopes going forward for the series. As always, spoilers for books 1 and 2 may be mentioned in here, but I will do my best to have, at worst, vague spoilers for book 3. So Words of Radiance to me obviously is very much Dalinar's book. And we get a lot of flashbacks, or most of the flashbacks are from Dalinar's point of perspective. And honestly, it was really cool for me personally to see just how vicious Dalinar was when he was younger, and him and Gavilar were kind of conquering Roshar. I really think that we had this person built up, and I had mixed feelings about this at first when I was reading it. Sometimes you don't always need to know how somebody became the person they are. I always think of Han Solo in Star Wars, where I didn't really need a Solo movie to get the story. Part of the mystique of that character was the not knowing, and just kind of the whole character didn't need that much of a backstory. And that's kind of how I felt early on with Dalinar. But there you get to a point where he kind of attacks a city for the last time, and I'm being vague for spoiler reasons, and just horrifying things happen. And I honestly really appreciated just seeing the brutality that I didn't really think Sanderson was going to write, but also just the brutality that is war, that did make Dalinar such a haunted character. We know he went and erased his wife from his memory, and you never really figure out why and what happened. And when that's revealed in this book, it is just, it's something else, and it's pretty dark. And just getting that perspective and getting to see those elements of Dalinar was really awesome. And it, like I said, it took me a little bit to warm up to it, but it was great. Also, continuing with Dalinar is just an overall positive for me in this book. Some of the conversations that he and Taravangian have, the guy who is either really smart or really dumb, some of the conversations that they have together are just, from a way of how you have to run a war and have these things happen, and some of the philosophical debates that they have of how things need to be done, and sometimes for the greater good you do have to do kind of repulsive, terrible things. Those are just some conversations that I always really appreciate and enjoy, and getting to see those put into the series, where battle and war is obviously a very large part of it. I think it's really an important note for Sanderson to hit on. With all the battles and things that happen in this book, and past and present, I think it did also show, and something I always really appreciate in my fantasy books, is that there are consequences for these battles and for these actions. There are characters who die and are not coming back. And I really think that's an important thing. And specifically, this really affects Kaladin. He does not want to lose anybody. This is very prevalent from book 1. He has a burning passion to make sure his group is safe, and that he can do everything in his power to protect them. And I was worried that it was going to get to the point where we kind of get these powers and these superheroes to the point where nothing can really affect anybody, and everybody important just kind of is going to squeak by and nothing bad is going to happen. And this book shattered that expectation for me. There are a handful of deaths that I really just didn't think were going to happen, and I'm glad that they did. Death and everything like that and consequences are so important in a book, in a series like this, because the powers seem so far and wide ranging that without them, I don't know, it just gives the book a nice balance, and at least brings back the suspension that, or the tension that not everyone's safe. And I think that's a really good thing that happens. Another character that I really liked seeing a little bit more in this book was Wit. Wit was just like an awesome part of this book. Doesn't play like the biggest role ever, but the role that he does play I think is really important, and it just shows, some of that interconnectedness that I really enjoy from the Cosmere in general. Obviously, there are some other parts of the Cosmere that got introduced late in book 2 and play a much bigger role in book 3 that I will not mention. But those connections, once again, always a hit for me. I love that I have finally gotten to a point where I have read most of the Cosmere at this point. I think I need to just finish Stormlight and the last book of Mistborn Heir 2, and then the Secret Projects, and I'm caught up. So I'm really at the point where I'm catching a lot of things, and I don't know, it's just really awesome to see. And it also keeps me wondering what is going to happen and how much of a crossover is going to happen in some of these series. So once again, always a positive for me with those Cosmere connections. In Oathbringer, I really think we get a little bit more of an expansion on the magic system. Not as much as I would want, but a little bit more of growth. We end up spending a lot of time in Shadesmar, and to me, that was super interesting. I don't think I fully grasped everything that was going on at some points in this book, but the time we spent in Shadesmar and just kind of everything that happened there, I don't know, it not only did it expand this world even more to literally a different not a physical plane, but another plane of cognizance, I guess is the best way to say it, was really cool, and just everything that happened there. I guess I had never, expected it to be as vibrant and as, as a world as it is. It's a world inside of a world, and I just think that's, really cool that we got to spend a lot of time in there, and just how different it is. It's such a creative world that, once again, Sanderson is just able to blow my mind with how much he is able to just make something that I personally have never experienced. I mean, I guess it's kind of similar to Teleron Reload in Wheel of Time, but I don't know, it's different. It has its own rules and everything, so that was all really cool. The last thing I'm going to mention in some of the things that I liked, and this is kind of a weird like, is that I hate Moash with the burning passion of 1,000 Suns. And I think that's really important because honestly, so far in this series, there aren't that many characters that I really hated. Obviously there's kind of like a good guys, bad guys kind of things being established, but strong emotions in a book is a really good thing. Whether you love or hate, I think those are really good things that a book can bring out of you. And Sanderson has created a character that I hate so much. I haven't really hated a character this much in a really long time. And it feels so good to have somebody that I can just say, I hate. The fact that he did what he did in this book and then has the audacity to do a Bridge 4 salute, I mean, I was so angry. I cannot stand him as a character, and oh man, but it's good. It's such a good thing for a book to be able to get these kind of emotions out of you. And the fact that Sanderson has these super happy emotions, I'm really thinking of in Words of Radiance when, that is Words of Radiance, right? When Kaladin steps in to help fight in the arena, and just some of these heroic moments that have happened in some of these series. Those are the highs on the positive side of that emotional spectrum. And with some of the deaths and then Moash just being Moash, those are some of those more negative emotions, but having that range and having those feelings come out in a book is just great. And Sanderson has once again done an awesome job of getting those out of me. And yeah, like I said, really hate Moash. I want terrible, terrible things to happen to him. That's my last positive that I'm going to mention here. I have more, but I'm going to go ahead and switch over to some of the things that didn't work for me as much in this book. So just in general, and this is a very general statement, but a lot of this book was slow. And I don't really have a problem with slow books in general, but it felt like it was slow in a way of, it was just kind of bloated a little bit. And I said earlier that a lot of the things that happen in this book are going to be super important for the series moving forward. And that's still true, and that is part of the reason why it is so slow. But that doesn't mean it was always the most enjoyable thing to read. And it'll be probably one of those things where, you know, we get to book 7 of this and things are happening and you're like, man, that was all set up back in this book. But that's not going to change the fact that in the moment experiencing it wasn't the best thing. This is the first book in this series that I felt was just kind of bloated. That there were sequences happening where, I don't know, maybe we could have just done without. Maybe we could have sped them up a little bit. And you know, I'm always hesitant to say that's because Sanderson, at this point in his career, was successful enough where maybe his editor doesn't want to cut back, but that's not really how Sanderson handles it. I mean, he has like 50 beta readers that go through and give him feedback before it even gets to his editors. So I think it was maybe just kind of, he's at a point in the series where he has so much planned for this world that he just needed to start dumping it into the series at this point. With some of the Spren stuff that's happening, I think, you know, he just needed to get that in there. And once again, it's not always the most enjoyable, fun thing to read. And like I said, I don't need it to be fast-paced battle, all that kind of stuff. I'm down to sit and contemplate with characters and everything. But some of this just felt like the only reason these things are happening were to introduce things to the overall story. And that's just not the most fun thing to read. Another thing that ended up really rubbing me the wrong way is Shallan and the different identities. You know, at first I thought it was kind of an interesting coping mechanism and a way for a character to kind of express trauma and work around things that they have experienced in their past. And in this book, it just kind of got to the point where it just seemed like somebody needed to slap Shallan and be like, hey, come on, this is all you. Everything you're doing, you're not actually becoming somebody different. You are still you. All of these are just, you know, aspects of you that if you could pull them all together, you would be an amazing character. And I mean, she is. At book 2, she was my favorite character. I don't know. It's really hard to say if it's her, Kaladin, or Dalinar. At this point, they're all so close, and I like them all for different reasons. But her having the different identities of Radiant and Veil and everything, and how different of a personality that they had, it got old kind of quick. And I could have just done with her maybe coming to grasp with that earlier on, and you know, it just, I don't know, it got tiring, and it just kind of wanted me to be like, Shallan, you're better than this. You are so much better than this. Treat yourself with some respect. You can do these things. Like, I guess that's maybe part of it is I have so much faith in this character that has been created, and them not having it was just frustrating. I really think that, you know, she is a phenomenal character. She is a strong character who has the ability to do a lot of things, and, you know, the fact that she's like coping in these weird ways just did not work for me, unfortunately. And I'm hoping that, you know, maybe that's something we can fix going forward. Sticking with some problems that I had with Shallan, the whole will they, won't they, Shallan, Adolin, Kaladin, weird romance dynamic drove me absolutely crazy. I hate that trope. The whole, oh, I'm with you, but I kind of have wandering eyes for this other person, but no, I would never do that. And then just, yeah, that is a storyline that I hated. And I know that you're probably screaming, they resolved that at the end of this book. I cannot tell you how happy I was that was resolved, because throughout this book, when it would come up, I would groan to myself. I was just absolutely against what was going on there, and I needed it to be resolved way sooner than it gets resolved. And I'm not going to say which way it went. I will say that it went the way I wanted it to. Other people might feel other ways, but oh man, that really grinded my gears. I just cannot stand love triangle-y kind of stuff, especially when it really didn't feel like it was serving any purpose whatsoever. It really just was like so weird. I don't know. I still don't understand what the purpose of it existing in the story is. And maybe it's something that'll come back around, and I don't know, maybe it's part of building up Shallan as a character, that she's working through some of these emotions. But in general, I mean, it was just awful for me. Biggest negative of this entire series so far has been that. And so the fact that it gets resolved at the end of this book, man, that's a huge positive for me. And I'm very much looking forward to not dealing with that ever again. Hopefully. Who knows what Sanderson will do to me next. My next negative is only kind of a negative, and that is some of the things that we get from the Assassin in White. This is just kind of a thread that's not going the way I personally would have liked it to go. Do I think it will be interesting? Yes. Is it showing growth and forgiveness and all of these kinds of things that are going on with that character and who he's going to end up interacting with? Yes, but I don't know. It's not really what I wanted, and I don't even know what I would have wanted out of this character. I think personally, I probably would have liked for him to have just died when he was supposed to in the previous books, and that probably would have been a more satisfying conclusion for myself. But I guess the redemption arc that is possibly going to happen with this character is supposed to, make up for the sins of the past. I don't know if that's actually what's going to happen. But personally, it's just not a storyline that is working for me as well as I would hope it would. Obviously, it's not like the biggest plot thread in this book, but it is obviously something that's present, and maybe in going forward in Rhythm of War, it will be something that grows on me. But right now, I don't find him to be all that of a compelling character. I don't really care about his story, his past. I really just kind of wish he didn't exist anymore. And so we'll see going forward if that changes. And my last negative I'm going to bring up is Stormlight Healing is too powerful. It is kind of ridiculous, and this isn't even something new. I mean, what's his name regrows an arm at the end of book 1, or is it book 1 or book 2? Either way, he regrows an arm super early on, and that should have been the first kind of warning signal for me that this healing power that they're getting might be a little too strong, right? And there's a scene in this book where Shallan gets hit in the head with a crossbow, right? And it's kind of done for a comedic scene when it actually happens. That's why I'm going to say it here, because it really doesn't play any relevance to the story whatsoever. It's kind of just a joke. And the fact that she can just eat a crossbow bolt to the head and just be fine. I don't know. It just feels so overpowered, and it makes me, for some of these characters, just feel like there really is not much that can harm them, which is unfortunate. I want my characters to have the possibility of being in danger. And I know the bad guys they're up against are on that next tier of just being crazy powerful, but I don't know. It just gives them that air of invincibility that just doesn't work for me, unfortunately. And so let's move on to some of my hopes moving forward as I get into Rhythm of War, and I guess Dawnshard before Rhythm of War, I will be reading that, is I really hope that there's not some redemption arc coming for Moash. Not every character who does something bad needs to be redeemed. You need to have bad characters who just end up doing something bad and there's no coming back from it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And this is a trope I see a lot in a lot of different books, a lot of different mediums, where somebody does something that they should never be able to come back from. I'm really thinking Theon Greyjoy. I never forgave Theon Greyjoy. Theon Greyjoy deserved everything that happened to him, and I stand by that. Everything that happened to him, he deserved. I don't care what he did to try and redeem himself. He deserves everything that happened to him and more. And maybe that's just me not wanting to be a forgiving person to my fictional characters, but that's how I feel. Everything that happened to Theon, he deserves. And anything that happens to Moash that is a negative, I think he deserves. And I don't want there to be some kind of redemption arc where I'm supposed to feel bad for him and I'm supposed to root for him again, because it's not going to happen for me. Obviously, I just said all that about Theon, and I think most people would probably disagree with me. But there's not going to be a redemption arc for Moash. For me, it's just not going to happen. What he did is unforgivable. I'm never going to forgive him. It was a terrible decision. It made no sense. And if there is a redemption arc for him, it's just going to be a thread that I complain about and don't like. So hopefully it doesn't happen. I hope moving forward we get even more of an explanation of the magic system. I still feel like we don't have a full grasp of it, and that's part of the mystery of the world. One of the interludes that happen with a soul caster and an island and everything, I would love to know more of what's going on with that. That was, I don't know, it almost felt very out of left field, but I would really like to see some more magic explanation. And that's kind of what I've heard Rhythm of War is, so I'm kind of looking forward to it, even though I've heard more negative about it than any other book in the series. I don't know. I want to learn more. I want to understand it better, and I'm hoping moving forward that is something we get. I would like to also get a little bit more from the Parchment. I think we got a good amount in this book, and maybe the same amount going forward would be good, but just kind of getting some perspectives from them is pretty good. And I don't know, it makes the world not feel so one-sided, but I'm also, it's either way. It could go either way. I either want more or I want less, because if they're going to be just kind of like the equivalently the bad guys, let's just have them be bad guys, right? I don't need their perspective if they're just purely going to be like evil, although it could be interesting, I guess. And I guess I would also like to see more of Jasnah and also Kaladin. Kaladin at points, and especially in this book, felt like he was just kind of an ancillary character, even though obviously he wasn't, but I kind of got that feeling sometimes. And same with Jasnah. I really thought she was going to play a bigger role in this book, and it wasn't as big as I thought. And I think she's a very fascinating character. I think she, has so much potential to explore this world and just everything. And I think maybe with some of the things that happen at the very end of this book, she'll maybe be a more important character going forward. But after her being sidelined for almost an entire book and then coming back, I don't know. I want to see more of her because she is just absolutely a fascinating character. But that is all I have to say about Oathbringer, and absolutely interesting book. I'm so glad I'm this far into Stormlight. Really looking forward to moving on to Dawnshard and Rhythm of War. But let me know any thoughts you have about this book and series down in the comments. Let me know if you would like a redemption arc for Moash, because we could disagree pretty hard on that. But yeah, that's all for me. And as always, have a good one.